Her name will come to me. Okay. So, there were some questions that I didn't answer. Oh, if you want one of those books, I'll say one for you if you want to put a reserve on it and put the deposit, then you'll be the one to get it. I expect 2 of each at least coming in.
I want one.
All right, well, see me up the house. Okay, your question.
Actually, that was Mike's, and he's not back yet.
Not back yet. So there was another question over here, the trees. The herons. You know, we have a unique situation here down by the marina there, because I do all my work on my boat in the marina. I can't work up on the campus. I can't work in hallways or offices. I just not able to concentrate. So I wrote all my books down on this boat that I have, and I never take the boat out because no one will go out with me, and I don't know how to do it. Every time I do take it out, I crash it into something, so I never take it out. So I found out they had a plug-in down there. I said, oh, I'll keep the boat and work on it. So of course, when the computers came in, that you could have portable computers, that was great. So I could sit there as the cheapest marina rent you'll pay. So, I mean, marine view with wildlife and birds and breezes. So I kept the boat, and I wrote all my books on it, plugged it into the power down there, and it was really great. And one of the best things that I saw about it were the birds. I love the birds down there, all the different birds that came visit. I got to know all the birds. And of course, all the other people, a lot of them on the boats, hate birds because they dump on their boats. So they're all sort of grousing about the birds. And you know, to my mind, if you're going to live near the waterfront, you've got to take what the waterfront produces. And you know, so they kept topping the palm trees. They didn't realize, and I walked every day, and I could see the palm trees is where the great blue herons nested, up in the palm trees, at the top of the palm trees. No one saw them up there. But I began to get the rhythms of the birds, when they came in, when they nested, when they had eggs, when they fledged. And so these people were reading stuff the Audubon Society was supposedly checking up before they topped the trees. And of course, I had all the dates wrong. So they were saying the birds didn't come till April. The birds were finished fledging by April. The birds came in December because it's California, not Virginia. And you know, and there were two. There were about, I'm wiping my hand on my shirt, my nose, I don't have a Kleenex. If anyone has a Kleenex, lend it to me. You know? Otherwise, I'll do it on my shirt. It'll be on the table all the time. Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it. So I could see that the birds were, you know, when the birds were coming and when they were laying eggs, and people would walk under these trees, never see them. But if you walk, you see all these drop pools under the trees where they're building their nests, you know, and you could see every tree where they had a nest in. And they said, oh, so when the fight came to stop the tree toppers, you know, the newspapers covered it because I called some of them. I'm used to the calling newspapers from the Dead Sea Scrolls, struggle to free the Dead Sea Scrolls. We had to get all the newspapers involved in that, and we ran it out of this university. So, you know, the marine authorities and all their toadies tried to say the birds were only roosting. The birds don't roost. Every time they go and land with a stick in their mouth, I watch them, they have sticks in their mouths. They build these things very, very, you know, industriously, you know, hundreds of landings, hundreds of takeoffs and everything. And every time they land, they would dump something on the ground. Every time they took off, they'd dump something. So around all the trees that they were nesting were the drop pools, as I call them. So you could see where they were. And so they come along with their buzzsaws and they try to cut all these things down. Well, it turns out that there's actually a $20,000 fine for disturbing nesting birds in the California Seacoast Code. So we pointed it out to the Marine Rangers when they came, and at least I did. And then the newspapers got it, and then they got frightened. So they all got the Audubon people, and they said, oh, they're not nesting yet. But I could show them from the drop pools that they all were nesting. So that fight went on for 2 years. It was covered in Long Beach Press Telegram. Finally, the Marine people passed a thing. They wouldn't top the trees during the nesting because they knew they were liable to get a fine if they did, and that some of us were watching. And so they said January 15th to September 15th. Well, and they're wrong. The birds come in December, start coming in December, and they leave around the middle of August. But anyway, got to thank God for small favors. They thrived this year because they left them alone. But there's this one guy He was a very aggressive guy, because he has a cafe sooner or later there. You probably know him. Some of you sit there probably. And he claims the birds dump on his customers out in the patio there. Well, the birds love the trees near his restaurant. It is true, because they not only nest in certain trees because they want the breezes and they want to go down. They want to catch the breeze taking off, and they want to have the breeze landing, and they also want to go back to the water channels. I've observed all this to fish. They fish back in the channel Los Alamitos Bay there. So they got a perfect takeoff landing from his cafe. You'll notice you go around the corner. There's no nests. A couple of about 50 meters further on down, but there they are. So there was a big fight last year. He was going to cut the trees down. And he complained, and the marine authorities, I don't know, I don't want to make any accusations that are slanderous, but maybe there was money that was involved. So they gave him permission to take these trees. So he was about to do it last December, and it was all ready to go, and then I came down and got the TV people there and showed them that the birds had already come and they were nesting. You know, the TV cameras, it was on Channel 4 News, and they showed they were nesting. You could see the birds were nesting, you know, and the nests were there, and they were sitting on them. So it was all on Long Beach Press Telegram. Beautiful, beautiful pictures of the great blue herons. So we won that battle to some degree, but he just put off his thing, so he's going to cut the trees next week. And I submit that he has no right to cut down palm trees that have been growing there 60 years. It took 60 years to get that told. Why? Because he wants to make a little more money for his cafe. If people come to his cafe and want to sit outdoors and do the marine life, then they should enjoy the fact that they're nesting birds in this beautiful great blue heron rookery. These are such majestic birds, anyone would be thrilled to have them there. Well, everyone at the marina is frightened to death to do anything about it because they're afraid of losing their slips if they cause trouble. So it has to be outside agitators who come down and stop these people from doing this. And I'm not going to do it anymore. I mean, I'm point man as it is, and I got bigger fish to fry and more important things to do. But any environmentalist you know who can be apprised of this kind of thing, that would be great, because they're going to do this in from September 15th on. They're going to cut down or move, as they say. I don't know how you can move 50-year-old palms, but the birds don't go where you move the trees. The birds don't, because you move the trees. They say, oh, we're going to move the trees, and the birds will have their nest. The birds only nest in certain areas where they do this thing, and it's a beautiful thing. I mean, there's around 30 or 40 pairs, and that's in an urban setting. That's a bigger story than the hawk in New York. That was, here you right in the middle of an urban setting. You've got a great blue heron rookery there in the middle of Long Beach, and these jerks want to cut the trees down. You know, that's what we're dealing with here. So yeah, anybody that you know and can tell that wants to be an environmental activist and can tip off other September 15th is when it's going to happen. Sometime after that, I don't know the exact day, but they'll do it so quick you wouldn't even be able to say Cotton Robinson. You know, and unless people are turned on to the fact that they're going to do it. And they're going to take palm trees, which are majestic, that belong to the city of Long Beach and the people of Long Beach area, and move them because some cafe owner doesn't like the fact there are birds in the trees. And I think this is a terrible precedent to set. Okay, he says there's only 5 trees that he wants to move, or cut down, whatever he's going to do. But the point is, those are very, very favorite nesting spots. And these are beautiful birds, and heritage of us all here to have this kind of beauty. And if people don't like the droppings, that's their problem. You can put an awning up, or they don't have to sit out there, and they don't have to enjoy the beautiful seafront view if they don't like to come and have all of what nature involves. And so that's what struggle's about. And so we stopped them from topping the trees, but I submit that this is a bad precedent, because then next year someone else says the trees are bothering me, I want to move them. Another restaurant will say, oh, the trees are bothering my patrons, the crab pot will say the same thing. Then the yacht club will say the same thing. Oh, they're bothering our outdoor, upstairs awning area. We want to move the trees. And this will just go on. And this guy will say he wants to move 7 more trees in the future and pay them off to move those trees. I don't think anyone should be allowed to move a tree that took 60 years to grow and is beautiful. And I don't think that the people should let them do it, that's all. I can't do any more than I've done. That's the story. Okay? So if you can gossip about it, tell everybody you know that this is coming. It's been in the Long Beach Press Telegram that it's going to happen sometime after September 15th. I mean, even the marine biology people asked the president's office to put it on the wire here at the university. Oh, they said we couldn't do this because it's not a campus thing. I said, well, you can at least just warn people on the campus that, in fact, this issue is coming up. If they care about environmental things in Long Beach, they can go and try to do something about it, stop these trees from being moved, which are nesting of great majestic birds. And so they said, well, we can't do anything about this. We can't let you put that on the thing. I said, well, do you know that you have a Long Beach marine biology research boat down there? Right under where the trees are? Do you know that your students are using that? And it says Long Beach State University and marine biology, and those marine biology people don't do a you-know-what thing? And it's right in their front nose. I've gone over and talked to them, and they're, oh, really? Oh, oh, we're going out to I don't know where, and look at the, you know. So anyway, if any of you are in the biology department, or marine biology, or conservation, just tell them. September 15th or thereafter, if they want to stop people from moving trees, that is the date of, they're going to move 5 big majestic palm trees.
Can we give them your email so that they can get a little bit more further?
No, I don't want to be the email person. I'll be honest about that. I've got too much to do. I'm trying to get this book done.
You get any literature?
Well, you just get the Long Beach Press Telegram and go up the website and put Great Blue Herons. I've got around 5 articles about it. You know. But I can, if you give me your email, I'll forward you all the stuff.
Okay.
Give me your email and I'll forward, no, I mean, just write it down in the thing, I'll forward you everything I have. In fact, whoever wants to put on email, I've got all the articles and all the letters that we've written out for. I just don't have the energy. I'm 7 years old. I don't have the energy to do this fight. I've done this much. It's you people, not you here in South, but people who are your generation that should do it. You know, I'm tired. And I got other things that I can do. That's all right. Here, just leave it there. Just put it there. I don't want to be a rubber on it. If people want to come and sign up, they can. I'll just copy everyone the same way I copy you. The problem is, I don't want you putting my email around because I got too much. I get too much spam type stuff as it is. So you know.
And I'm not making any promises either, but
No, I don't make any promises. Just get it around, but put my email out of it, Wayne. Because I just have too much stuff coming in. I fought this one alone already, and I don't think I should have to fight it anymore. If the people don't want to. I told them, I got a paper guy, aren't you going to go out there and do it? I want to be a story. I said, oh, you want me to be the sacrifice for your story? He said, well, yeah. I said, well, why don't you do something? Why don't you do some research, find out when they're going to do this? Why don't you look up the ordinances and see that this is actually against the conservation practices of the country at the time? Why don't you do a proper story instead of waiting for us to give you a story? Oh, that might be work. I said, yeah, we can get a Pulitzer Prize, too. And then some other person from AP called me the other day, well, I'm doing a story on the Great Blue Heron rookeries because my dad sits at the Schooner Raider Cafe. And I said, oh, yeah? And she said, well, you know, the Great Blue Herons have been increasing in numbers now. The sea rangers, whoever they are, told me that they're flourishing. I said, well, yeah, that's because we've been fighting for them. Yeah, but, you know, therefore you don't need those trees there, do you? So I already know she's been put up to write the story for AP to say that they don't need these. It isn't a question of that. It's the trees. No one has a right to move trees to get rid of birds' nests to make a cafe more, you know, profitable for someone. I just don't. The guy makes plenty of money as it is. And those are there and they should stay there. And nobody should be allowed to move it for such a purpose. So, I mean, I wouldn't cooperate with her on an article. You'll see it in AP. It'll be out. She'll write something in about a week or two. And it'll be a, you know, Pharisee article. Pharisee means seek accommodation with the establishment. Maybe that's the, see, the Scrolls have a group called the Seekers After Smooth Things. That's what they call, and those are the Pharisees. They don't like the Pharisees. And seekers are those who seek after halakot. Well, if you know rabbinic literature, what the rabbis are doing is seeking after halachot. halachot are legal traditions of oral law. So the scroll people know that that's what they're doing and are making a pun on it and saying they're seeking halakot, smooth things, not halachot, legal traditions. So we know that those are the Pharisees that they're angry at for making, and I say that is seeking accommodation with foreign power. That's what I think that allusion means. What was your question now?
Yeah, can you more clearly state for me, anyway, please, the connection between the Pharisaic, academic, Yavna sort of Judaism and how that is connected to the sort of acquiescence and subservience of
Well, I mean, the very fact of the matter that the patriarch, first of all, the high priest was the key thing in the Maccabean uprising. Who were going to be high priests? Whether it was going to be a native procedure election or whether it was going to be appointed by foreign kings. And the scrolls and other documents say you shall not put a foreigner over you, therefore you shall not appoint, you shall not accept appointment of high priesthood by foreigners. Now, to my mind, the birth moment of the Pharisee party comes in the Maccabee books when a group says that they're going to accept the high priest come that the Seleucids appoint rather than the Maccabean family who claim to have the covenant of Phineas. Phineas was, if you know your Old Testament, in Numbers 21 or someplace, that he cleansed the camp of impurity and therefore won the right to the high priesthood for his descendants in perpetuity. I mean, I'm not advocating this, I'm just saying what the issues were. The zeal for the Lord that Phineas showed, won for him the covenant of peace, as it was called. This is raised in the Maccabee books to consolidate the priesthood of the Maccabean family, who are priests, and they claim that by everyone who has zeal for the law, the Maccabee books say, follow us. So they wanted a native appointment procedure, basically. The scrolls are the same. They want a righteous high priest. And so the big thing was that first of all, the Romans, after the conquest by Pompey, appointed the high priest, and then once they gave the country over to Herodian kings who had carved out a governorship for themselves, then the Herodian kings kept the high priestly vestments and appointed the high priests. So now everything, the Pharisee party then went away. I said that we had a group called the Hasideans. Maccabees 2 says that the Hasideans were the followers of Judas Maccabee par excellence. That's like the Hasidim here in Long Beach. We say in English, but it's really Hasidim. Pious people now. Jewish mysticism has kept these traditions alive down to our time. So we have Jewish mystic groups now calling themselves, led by a tzaddik, who are Hasid, and the tzaddik, the righteous one, leads the Hasidim, and so on, and et cetera, et cetera. This is in the modern, what we call, what are those groups in Long Beach? What do they call themselves? Oh, Hasidim. That's what they call themselves. Hasidic groups. But this is already in the Maccabean literature. And the Hasidim were the followers of Judas Maccabee par excellence. And the Maccabees 2 book says at the end that these people went to the Seleucids and said, look, these Hasideans are the followers of Judas Maccabee, and they will not let the kingdom have peace. And because they don't follow a high priest appointed by you, and then the guy wants them to appoint him. His name is Alchemus, and in any case, the Maccabee books come to an end on that note with him leading Seleucid forces back into Palestine to try to overcome the Maccabees. Well, this goes on down, and the group of the Hasidim that break away, Pharisee means to break away, they break away from the Hasidic movement and honor, they say, oh, this is a high priest of the lineage, therefore we can accept him. So they honor that, and I say that's the birth movement of the Pharisee party. It's about 150 BC, and it has to do with priestly legitimacy. It's in my books. You can get it in my book called The Dead Sea Scrolls and the First Christians. I go into all those things in those books. There's a monograph in that collection called Maccabees, Zadokites, Christians, and Qumran. Qumran being the name for the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. And I show that's, the issue was priestly legitimacy and whether it was going to be a native priesthood or a foreign appointed priesthood. Once you get the group saying we'll accept foreign appointed high priests, they accept all the other things. They accept the Herodian dynasty, they accept Herod. The famous Hillel and Shammai seem to have been Herod's head of Sanhedrin. Now these are heroes among the Jewish people, granted, but it's clear from Josephus' works that they, or someone very close like them, Josephus calls these two individuals Polio and Sameas. Polio and Sameas. And I can't imagine that they can represent anyone but what the rabbinic groups call Hillel and Shammai. I think that's just obvious. And they were the head of his Sanhedrin, and they predicted that you shouldn't resist Herod, and they told the people in 37 BC, when Herod came back with a Roman army to impose himself on the people, who had gone over to the Maccabees again, who were constantly causing trouble and trying to get back the power that they had lost to the Roman armies and the Herodian family, that the Polio and Sameas recommended to the people of Jerusalem in 37 BC when Mark Antony gave Herod an army to come back and take Jerusalem, to open the gates to Herod. That was their recommendation all the time. And to show that not the popular party, the people resisted, did not open the gates to Herod, and Herod stormed the city with Roman troops and massacred everyone who resisted him. And these were the old establishment, the Maccabean establishment. So that went on to Herod's death in 4 BC, and then the revolutionary strife broke out again all the way up to 66 AD, and then up to 132 to 136. You say, well, you shouldn't have done all this. It was wrong, troublesome. Well, if you were dealing with emperors like Nero, you know, people were involved in incest, and Tiberius had little boys down on his little island in Capri, where he used to, according to the Suetonius, nibble at their sexual parts as they swam by. And you couldn't have expected the people in Palestine with their mores to accept this kind of behavior from the ruling classes. And therefore, the scrolls make a big thing about fornication. I'm not about these. I'm just trying to sort out historical problems. You know, I'm not myself not going to make problems over such issues. I'll fight for birds, maybe, but not the most thing that I'll do. But so this struggle is going. So what did the Pharisees allowed niece marriage? The scrolls opposed niece marriage. The Pharisees did not oppose polygamy. The scrolls opposed polygamy. And I'm not saying they're right or wrong, I'm just telling you why. Because the Herodianist Herod had 10 wives, and the Pharisee says it's okay. That's part of the seeking accommodation with foreigners. You say, well, why don't Jews have 10 wives today? Because in about 1000 AD, Pharisaic Judaism, Rabbinic Judaism finally outlawed polygamy. Wasn't the custom too much anyway. But the Herodian family was an Arabo-Greek family, and that's what they were like the Saudi family today. And Herod had 10 wives. It was unheard of. And so that, to my mind, when they're attacking polygamy and say the ruler should have one wife and only one wife in all his lifetime, that's in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Temple Scroll, they're attacking the Herodian establishment. And the Pharisees accepted it. So over small points of law, they made big issues, build a fence around the Torah, they said. But over big points of law, cooperation with foreign power, polygamy, niece marriage, different things of that kind, they let slide. And that was what the fight was about. And that's the difference. So there's lots of things in the Talmudic literature that make a lot of issues, and that's later on. Anyway, a lot of those discussions come after the temple fell. Anyway, I'm just telling you what it was before the temple fell. After the temple fell, they had their own schools that they argued among each other. The school of Shammai was more strict, the school of Hillel was more liberal, and so on. But they had their own arguments in their different schools, where they were in Palestine or different cities in Iraq and so on. But in Palestine, the issues were very clearly defined. They wanted a high priest of higher righteousness, something like the letter to the Hebrews says. We have a higher high priest beyond sin, the pure and holy high priest. Jesus is our king and high priest. It's all in the letter of the Hebrews, picking up Hebrew themes, but slightly Paulinized. I don't have to go through it to show you where the Paulinization is and where the native nationalist sentiment. I have some material in this book on the letter of the Hebrews. But that's all I can tell you about that. But, okay, so the temple fell, 70 AD. The last remnants of the Zealots committed suicide in Masada, 73. The triumph was held in Rome after that, in that period. The triumph is on the Archbishop Titus. The new Roman imperial family came in. The Julio Claudians, the old family, has been destroyed with the assassination or suicide of Nero. It's not clear which. I do kill bugs. I'm sorry, because my house gets full of bugs when I see one. I've just given up being liberal about it. I apologize. I just got tired of flies and the mosquitoes and things. I feel bad, but it's just a habit for me, because now if I don't get them when the light's on, they're going to bother me all night long. So I have to get them when I see them. My screens have holes in them. My screens have holes in them anyway. So the old family from Caesar to Nero were the Julio Claudians, named after Julius Caesar, Julio, and Claudius, the family that was connected through them by marriage to Augustus. Then with Nero, the last imbecile that was part of this family, and the previous ones were all dreadful. Caligula was out of his mind, totally insane person. Tiberius was a disgusting brute. Nero killed his own mother, kicked his wife to death, and every other thing you could imagine, and hated Jews to boot. Supposedly blamed the fire of Rome on Christians. I don't think those were Christians of the Pauline stripe. I think he wasn't afraid of Pauline Christians, if he knew the difference. I don't think he knew at that time that messiness to me would be the word. And at that time in 62 or 3, whenever the fire in Rome was, or 60 something or other it was, early 60s, I think there were only messianic agitators in Rome, more or less aggressive, more or less militant. And I don't think that the turning of the cheek agitators had come into prominence yet. That's, to me, is a later stage. That's the Romanization, Pax Romanum stage of things. Anyway, that's another thing. But if the Christians did have anything to do with the fire in Rome, then they were probably Messianic Palestinian Christians of the stripe I'm telling you about. Well, forget that. So this Flavian family came in, took the triumph, put the Arch of Titus up there, and it's still there. You see the Jewish captives coming to Rome with their temple accoutrements. Now, it's recently been revealed and shown, and I suspected that all along, that the Flavians, the new family, where they got the money to build the Colosseum for fun and games was from their sacking of the Jewish temple and the temple treasure. To me, that symbolizes all of what happened in this period. That this horrendous thing that we all worship today, oh, the beautiful Colosseum. Yeah, architecturally it's an astonishing building and it's very impressive, but it's not beautiful. It's a disgusting, horrific symbol of what man's depravity is and was. I'm not trying to be a moralist about it. I mean, what was done in the Colosseum for the entertainment of the mass to try to sort of, placate them and get them involved in other sporting events, if you like, away from agitation and so on, was, to my mind, horrendous. And part of the people that perished, maybe there were Christian martyrs too, but certainly part of the people that perished were the prisoners that they took from the Palestinian campaigns. Certainly, after they ran out of them, they went and looked for other people. Okay, fine. But the first couple of 100,000 were these people for the entertainment. Then they built this stadium out of their money. which became this gladiatorial monstrosity for 300 years. And we all still go pay homage to, oh, the Colosseum of Rome, how romantic, how wonderful, how marvelous. No, it's a disgusting symbol of depravity. Architecturally, it's impressive. You know, so might have Hitler's new capital that he was going to build might have been impressive too. But the Arch of Titus, I don't consider that impressive. I think it's a disgusting display of brutality. And the people you know that are depicted there were all killed. And all the treasure that was depicted there was taken and used for the purposes that we see, that we know. So that's the Flavian family. And so they came in. And so the Jewish situation changed. And then the agitation continued. There were uprisings in the Eastern Mediterranean, as I told you. There were uprisings in Egypt that were not chronicled by Josephus. The Bar Kokhba uprising was not chronicled by Josephus, so we don't have the details. But the Roman historians say that the Roman general, I think his name was Severus from Britain, left out the customary greeting when he reported to Hadrian, who was then the emperor, and Hadrian had a little boyfriend that he threw into the Nile River to make him a god when he went and visited Egypt. A real nice guy, Hadrian. He was into Greek things, so he was very big on this little kind of thing like that. He didn't have any children or anything of that kind. He had this sort of activity that he was interested in. And one of his little friends was called Antonius, I think his name was. Anyway, he had him strung up and thrown into the Nile because he wanted him to make a god. I think he wanted him to become Osiris or the son of Osiris. I forget. Osiris had a son. I forget. Horus. I think he wanted him to be the new Horus. Yeah, it was nuts. Anyway, the point was when Severus wrote about the second uprising, he said he neglected to put "I and my army are well," which meant it was a really tough war. But we didn't have any Josephus to tell us. And it was fought differently. It was a guerrilla war. And we've recently archaeologically found all of the underground installations that they made, that they would hide in and then come out and attack the Roman army from these underground caves and shelters that they artificially constructed in different locales throughout Palestine. But it was unsuccessful, of course, and the repression was terrible, worse than the first one. Jerusalem was, temple had already been plowed under in 70 AD by the Flavians, because they knew that the temple was where the center of agitation was. But they built another temple in Egypt, apparently, at some point. And the Zealots, the Sicarii, Josephus tells us, went down there. The Romans pursued them down to Egypt and destroyed that temple too. The warfare went on in Egypt and North Africa. And as I said, there was an uprising under Trajan in 115, and they were all wiped out. I mean, literally wiped out. The Jewish community, that is, in Egypt. And the 136 was pretty awful too. And basically Palestine was depopulated, certainly of Jews. If there were any Jews who survived, there were a few communities, a small community survived in Galilee for a certain amount of time, but on the whole it was depopulated. And they went to different places. They went to Iraq particularly, what we now call Iraq, then Babylonia. And they were apparently very hospitable there, and the community flourished for maybe 500 or 1,000 years. It was a very flourishing place. They went further afield into North Africa, Carthage, and other places. They'd already gone to Carthage under the Phoenicians, and it's hard to tell Phoenicians from Jews, by the way, because the northern kingdom cooperated with the Phoenicians, and Hiram of Tyre, as he was called, was very close to Solomon, and they used his materials to build the temple. And the northern kingdom, we know, was very involved in the industrial enterprises of the Phoenicians. The Jews followed the Phoenicians in different settlements across the Mediterranean. They were in Spain before the Romans were. And a lot of places like that. So the Jewish communities grew up in places like that. Grew up in Byzantium, grew up north of the Black Sea. Jewish traders went all the way to China. They're called the Rhodanite traders. They dominated the trade routes from Babylon and the Silk Route and so on. So, I mean, it was a very wide-ranging activity that was going on, but not so well documented. In Egypt, for instance, Philo's family, the one who I mentioned before as a very important family we've gone to complain about, Pontius Pilate, he, a Jewish philosopher in Egypt of the upper classes, his family dominated the Red Sea trade to India. And I've been to India, and I can tell you there are synagogues in India that go way, way back, and their traditions go way back on the Malabar coast, the traditions of Cochin. And if you go to India and you go to Cochin, certainly go visit the synagogue there, because it was really a very old synagogue. And their paintings on the wall show them arriving around this period in India. Whether it's mythological or real, you have to decide. I think it actually was. Jewish groups spread out down into southern Arabia, as I told you, into Ethiopia. They're still coming back to Israel from Ethiopia now. And we've far-flung areas. And Rome, too. But Palestine was really forbidden them, if you want to call it that way, after the two uprisings. And certainly Jerusalem was forbidden. It was actually barred. No Jews could enter Jerusalem after the first and the second uprising. They thought the temple was going to be rebuilt in the second uprising, and they were discouraged and found out that it wasn't. And then things got really bad. I don't have all of the details about how bad things got, but they got very, very bad in terms of Palestine. But the Romans were fairly generous in other places in terms of allowing subject peoples to flourish as long as they didn't make trouble. So these other places did. There were Jews in Rome, there were Jewish catacombs in Rome. As I said, Spain was a very old community before the Romans got there. Gaul to some extent, Black Sea, around the Black Sea, and then further east, it's hard to document, certainly in Mesopotamia, and then on to these other routes. There are Japanese tribes that claim descent from Jews to this day. And there are tribes in Afghanistan that claim descent from Jews. These may be mythological. I think that some of it is real history. The Japanese thing, I think, has some background to it. Not all of Japan, but a certain small trickle of contact there. And certainly there are Jews in China, old communities from the trade routes. I forget the name of the big city out there in western China. Out near Tibet and Mongolia. I forget what the name of it is. I can't remember the name of the Chinese group. But those groups were going on all of this time. But in the Roman Empire, when Christianity took over the Roman Empire, it was a very virulent form of Paulinized Christianity that took over the Roman Empire. And I don't have all the details. You can read a lot of books that have been written on this subject now. I think The Sword of Constantine is a recent book on that subject. And there are one or two other books of that kind that have been written that shows this is a very, very virulent form of Christianity as far as Jews went, as far as anti-Semitism went. And the reason all you have to do is pick up Eusebius's history. I mean, I'm glad Eusebius wrote his History of the Early Church for whatever good and bad it is. But as a person, he's not a Christian. He's full of hatred. He doesn't realize he's full of hatred. He's full of hatred, and his hatred is virulent. I mean, he loves the fact that the Jews are reduced to such starvation in Jerusalem. According to Josephus, that they end up eating their own children. He loves that. He has it all, and he has it in his books to show how they were punished for their crimes against Christ. And this is the man who was Constantine's archbishop. I mean, just read the first two books of Eusebius's church history, and you'll understand, unfortunately, some of the attitudes in the Western world that we just saw illustrated in Malibu with a drunk driving confrontation. I mean, those people who behave like that or have those mindsets, I mean, they're not really responsible for it. It's been percolating through the undercurrent of the civilization for several, almost millennia, 2 millennia. And as a good Christian, you have to do everything you can to fight against that, I think, because the seeds are unfortunately there. And so and when you get someone like Eusebius, it's in raw outline. He doesn't know he's a bigoted person. He's a totally bigoted, virulently full of hatred person. So, I mean, you say, well, how can that be? He's a good Christian, isn't he? No, he's a bad Christian. He's not a good Christian. I mean, that to me isn't what a good Christian should or would or ought to be. You know, I'm not a judge. I'm not going to accept that as a good Christian, for sure not. And yet he writes over to church history, and he helped Constantine, who was no saint by any means. Constantine didn't take his conversion to his deathbed because he didn't. He had so many sins that he wanted to, that he needed to atone for. I forget all the reasons there, but you can read about Constantine. He was quite a politically and pretty ruthless, violent person. His adaptation of Christianity, for whatever reason he wanted it to be the state religion, had a lot of political aspects to it, put it that way. Again, not an aspect, but the point is, when Christianity did become melded with the power of Rome, then the situation of the Jews in that part of the universe became dire. Because they were refused to be allowed to follow the kind of life patterns they had previously followed. So they couldn't enter, as I said, they were barred from the trades. They were barred from all kinds of different activities, partly because of the lack of being willing to take a Christian oath and things like that, barred from court proceedings, barred from witnesses in courts, barred from service in the army, barred from bearing arms, things of that kind. And you say, well, that's not it's a very unenviable position. So their position deteriorated. I'm not blaming Christians of goodwill for this. Many of them didn't understand what was going on as a result of these legal injunctions placed on the people as a whole because of their alleged crimes against the Savior, which I'm sure they didn't commit, and surrendered to Rome. So other people surrendered to Rome, but unfortunately they weren't considered on a theological level. You didn't, Gaul surrendered to Rome, the Britons surrendered to Rome, but it wasn't a theological point, because there had not been documents written on that issue that were theological. So the Jewish situation was not only political, it was a theological one that was wedded to a political one, and it was a very deleterious situation for them. So the image we now have of the wandering Jew, of the Shylock Jew, of Shakespeare's portrayal of them, and Shakespeare knew Jews because he was in love with a Jewish woman. That's why he wrote that Shylock book, because he hated her father, because he didn't want her to associate with him. So basically, to some extent, he was just writing about his own situation in London with the sort of Grey Lady of the Sonnets, or whatever she was called, and so on. But she was actually a voice teacher from Italy, whom he had gotten to know, of Jewish background. But it wasn't just Shakespeare who portrayed them that way. There's just the classical stereotypes that you can see in literature and so on. And the Jews began to internalize this themselves. So they, to some extent, began to act like they were portrayed as. So it was which came first, the cart or the horse? Well, I try to show you that that's not how they were in Palestine at all. You see, when they were wedded to their land, they were in no way the image of the classical anti-Semitic view that you have of Judaism that someone like Mel Gibson might still possess in people of his mindset. They weren't like that. And you see, when they return to their land and are allowed to be sovereign people, they become something quite different again entirely. So you see that it was these restrictions and onerous situations imposed on them by a hostile establishment that both wanted to perpetuate them but didn't want them to flourish. So that people say, you see what happened to the people who killed the Savior and so on and so forth. That this is the degraded state that they presently exist in. And the Jews internalized that, to my mind. I'm giving you my take on the history. I may be wrong in these matters. It's a vast sweep of history, you see. You see Jews, you speak to Jews, oh yeah, we killed Christ, and so on and so forth. Well, they didn't kill Christ, as a matter of fact. But they don't know that, because they figure, oh well, everyone's been talking like this for 1,500, 2,000 years. There must be some truth to it. And yeah, he was different than what our rabbis say he should be, and so on and so forth. So yeah, we probably opposed him and did this and that and so on. And they have no idea of the complexity themselves of what I've tried to show you a little bit of in my few lectures here, of the early history of their people and all themselves. I mean, my own children wouldn't know. People who you meet have no idea whatever. They accept all the stereotypes. They think that's the stereotype of them. They accept, because I had a professor once, he put it very, very succinctly. He said, poetry is truer than history. And he turned out to be a very right-wing Christian, as it turned out, and very intellectually Christian, but I didn't know that at the time. I was just a little jerk. I'm an undergraduate, I had no idea, but he was a very intelligent fellow. And I always thought that really appealed to me. I put it in my first book on James in the introduction. Poetry is truer to history, and I tried to understand what he meant by that. And whether he had invented it, I'm sure he didn't. Other people before him had said it, and he picked it up. But what he meant, and you'll pick it up from me now, what he meant by that is that it isn't what actually happened that matters. It's what the poet said happened that matters. It's how it's portrayed literarily and historically that matters. It's what people think happened that matters. I'll give you an example from Islam, as I was just talking about in my class earlier today, about how Muhammad repeats ad infinitum in the Quran, and the Jews killed all of the prophets. I've told you about that before, but what do you mean the Jews killed all the prophets? What are you talking about? Where did you pick that up from? Then I read in my class the quote from Paul in 1 Thessalonians, where Paul said, and the Jews killed the Lord Jesus and all the prophets and so on too, and so on, and then Stephen's speech in Acts is the same thing. Well, but no one ever questions it. So the Jews say, oh yeah, we killed all the prophets. Yeah, I guess we did. And the Christians say, oh yeah, the Jews killed all the prophets. And the Muslims go around saying it. And so now we're in the 20th century, and you meet some of the Muslims, well, you're the people that killed all the prophets. So you say, well, okay, name one. What prophet? We're not talking about Jesus here. Name some prophets that we killed. All right. Forget Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Those are patriarchs. Okay, let's just go down to Moses. Moses, they killed Moses? No, they didn't kill Moses. Did they kill Joshua? No, they didn't kill Joshua. Let's go down to David's time. Did they kill Nathan? No. Did they kill Eli? No. Did they kill Samuel? No. Okay, let's go further down. Did they kill Amos? Did they kill Michael? Did they kill Hosea? Did they kill Jeremiah? Did they kill Isaiah? Did they kill Ezekiel? No. So what prophet did they kill? Name one. Well, the Jews killed all that. It said it in the Quran. Yeah, but name one. Oh, you mean John the Baptist and Jesus? Is that who you're talking about? And then you go through and you show Josephus' testimony that in fact they had no responsibility, that John the Baptist was killed because he was a popular Jewish leader, and the Herodian appointee from the Roman Empire was afraid that he was so popular among the people they would do anything that he would want, and therefore he thought he should put him to death as a preventive execution, not because there was a Salome who danced a sexy dance. That's not in Josephus. The sexy dance deal and the head on the platter comes from an attempt to present Roman officials in a neutral way. That he didn't want to do this. He was forced to do it by some weakness or something. And Pilate's a nice guy. His wife said, don't kill this righteous man. Pilate was the most violent, as I told you, governor that there ever was in Palestine, and he was removed from power by the complaints over his violence. He didn't scruple to shed blood at all. So, you know, the Pontius Pilate of the Gospels is a whitewashed pot. He wipes his hands of it. No, he didn't wipe his hands of anything. How do I know? Because I know what Pontius Pilate was. And I know what he did to insurrectionists. and so on. Anyway, forget that. The point being that you talk to people, and so then they say, yeah, okay, well, forget the Jesus matter, that's open, that's a matter of, well, we'll just have to argue about some other time. But the John the Baptist, so then what? There's one person that you want to say they may have been involved in, and they may have been establishment Herodian, accommodating Jews who were involved with the Roman authorities who wanted to get rid of troublemakers. There may have been people like that, but that's not the popular mass by any means, shape, or form. We're going to blame the Jews for something the Herodian appointees may have done. The Herodian appointees who the Jews resisted for 200 years, and so on. Anyway, so you tell people this and they're like, oh, really? So this is what I mean about slogans being internalized. People accept those slogans. So the Jews accepted these things too. They just said, oh, well, their rabbis didn't tell them any different, or couldn't tell them any different. They weren't studying these things carefully. They weren't allowed to anyway. All the Talmudic references were edited out. In any case, their books were inspected by the authorities over and can show the censorship of their books over a 1,000-year period. They just forgot. And again, the scrolls have been tremendous to awaken our interest again in all these things. So a lot of this stuff became internalized. So by the time of the Middle Ages, and we are in a dark age period, it's hard to tell what was going on there. The only profession that the Jews were really functioning in a widespread way was money lending, because of the ban on usury in the scripture. That was all, and of course anyone who's money lending is hated in any case. And then because they were seen to have surrendered to the authorities and serfs of the royal treasury, they didn't fit into the feudal medieval system. They could then be taxed by the royal authorities to get the money back, or a portion of the money back, that they were making in these, you know, very minor, if you like, monetary operations. And they had to pay for the privilege of residence in countries. There was a poll tax and so on that the rabbinic authorities, that's why Jews have always deferred to rich people, because the rich people in their community always paid the tax for all the others. And so it went. You survived in a country. I think that book, Ivanhoe, about England, shows a very good picture by Sir Walter Scott. You've seen the movie with Elizabeth Taylor where, you know, this Isaac the Jew has to finance the knight's armor and so on and so forth, and you know, they can't do it. And I think that is actually a pretty good picture. Well, I'll quit in a minute, just to make a long story short so we can come up closer to the modern period. They started expelling Jews from Western European countries. Why did they expel Jews from Western European countries? Well, somewhere in the early Renaissance, or somewhere around the 1300s period, what are known as the Lombards in Italy got special papal dispensation to become involved in money lending and banking. So this took away any role that the Jews had in the countries where they were living at that time in the West. So once the Lombards, when they saw that this was a very lucrative thing to be involved in, got the papal dispensation, and it may have been involved with the Medici popes, I don't know how this all happened, and that's another situation entirely. If you go to Western Europe, you'll see there's a Lombard street in every big city in Western Europe, in London, in Brussels, and so on. This is where the Italian bankers set up shop. So there was no longer any need for Jewish banking or money lending, whatever you want to call it. So slowly the Jews were expelled from England, from France, from Germany, from Austria, from Hungary, and so on. And in Italy they were protected by the popes for various reasons, and pushed further east. And that's where the word Yiddish language came from. Why do Jews in Russia and Poland speak a German language? Because as these expulsions pushed them eastwards, on the fringes of the Western Europe flourishing areas, what you would call the border areas, or the Netherlands, and you know, the areas where were sort of outside the really governing powers of Europe, where things weren't so rigidly formalized that they could survive, They brought their language with them, and the language was Low German of the early Middle Ages. And that's what Yiddish is. If you know Yiddish, you know German. That's a very vulgar, low form of medieval German mixed with Hebraicisms and written in Hebrew letters. So, and that spread all across Poland, Russia, and all these other places. Ukraine, Romania, Hungary, wherever the Jews were, they spoke Yiddish. And that is a German language. So slowly, as their banking professions wore thin, and those kinds of things, the last expulsion was in Spain. What year did that occur? 49-2, the year that Columbus left for America, and people think the Jews were involved in the financing of that particular expedition because they had to leave. The Muslims were expelled from Spain too at the same time, but it was when Spain was reunified in 49, I'll pick up there next time, that they were expelled. So in any event, slowly Western Europe rid itself of its Jews. Now we're only going to get a flow back into Western Europe in the Mendelssohn period. And that's going to come as the emancipation process develops, as the Napoleonic Wars develop, and so on. I'm getting ahead of myself. What I want you to do and read for next time, so that we are all on the same wavelength here, is if you can get a hold of this book or borrow each other's books or something like that. I'm going to read it fast a bit, but you can read Christian Dome, The Civil Status of the Jews, and the Emancipation of the French Jews. I mean, next time we may not cover all this. And Solomon Maimon, Tortured Drifting, which is someone caught in the middle. And then this other book, as I told you, where's the book? Read the, and I said, if some of you want to lend it to each other, or wait till I get this stuff in, or borrow it from each other, or whatever. Not this one. Where's the other book that we so blithely dispensed with here? What I've been covering here is Terror and Libel, 19, the medieval Jewish community and the ghetto. The first 3 chapters of this book from page, well, this prelude is worth reading too, so from about page 17 to 34. That is worth reading. And as I said, I will probably have a couple of more copies of this and a couple of more copies of the modern Jewish history next time, depending on what they send me and what they, these people never send what they say they're going to send you. And that's it. So see you next time. And when I'm going to read Mendelssohn, well, we'll read them when we think it's the right time.
Jen, did anybody tell you about...
Yeah, I'm listening.